Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. My name is Jerry Miller. Thank you kindly for joining us on the I Love CVille Network. We love connecting with you guys through this platform. Today's show hits close to home. Staff writers across the country are thinking this, and they've been thinking this for, I'd say, maybe decades. We certainly were thinking about unionizing our team at the Daily Progress in 2006. Because we frankly felt we were taken advantage of as a team at the newspaper with what was expected of us. I'm so excited to welcome Katherine Knott to the program and Nolan Stout to the show. They will join us in a matter of moments. We will spotlight their efforts to create a union at the Charlottesville Daily Progress. I think if this is able to get done successfully, the community in totality will benefit from this because more resources will be poured into the editorial staff, and with more resources, they will be able to produce even more quality and engaging journalism. I am a news junkie, and still subscribe to print editions of 3 newspapers: Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and Charlottesville Daily Progress. Nothing better than having the print on my fingertips in the morning over my coffee as I learn what's going on in my community. We'll welcome them to the show in T-minus 30 seconds. First, give some love to one of our fabulous clients, Interstate Pest and Service Companies. We're their advertising agency of record. Any marketplace branding or advertising you see originates in this building on the first and second floors. Interstate started in 1969 with the first generation, Mr. Robert Wells. Today, it's a 4-generation strong family business with almost 100 employees in a Commonwealth-wide working footprint. Dr. Wagner, Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine, also one of our fabulous clients. Sports medicine, chiropractic care. Dr. Wagner is changing people's lives at Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Judah Wickhauer, you are the director of the spaceship. Please, my friend, go to the studio cam. And let's welcome Katherine Knott to the show. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here.
Nolan Stout, your second rodeo.
Yep.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm going to start with an opening question. We'll go ladies first.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is awesome. I have tremendous respect for what you are doing. I respect your courage, your conviction, your confidence, your vision. You and a handful of team members are looking to create a union within the newsroom. I will get out of the way. The show is yours.
You know, what you said at the beginning of the show, you couldn't have said it better. You could have made our argument better for it. You know, this is an idea that's been percolating for about a year in our newsroom, and it's our way of saying local news is important, and we want to make sure the Daily Progress sticks around, and we think that's through a healthy and supported workplace. With journalists that can be here if it's a stepping stone, they can thrive while they're here. If they want to be here for 30 years, that's an option too, as opposed to being forced out after a few years and feeling like you have to leave.
Jump in here, Nolan.
Yeah, if you want this to be a stepping stone, even you don't want people to come here and be so overworked or so overwhelmed that they decide, well, this was a terrible idea. I need to go do something else in my life. You want them to have the support that they need to grow their career and move on and represent this community while they're here and once they move on to somewhere else.
I started it in the Daily Progress as a stringer in 2002, working for $30 a story. The story often took 5 to 6 hours of my time. That then led to a staff writer position. I was so pumped to get the staff writer position. I'll put the compensation metrics out there for me personally. Mm-hmm. I was paid $10 an hour in a salaried position. I was expected to do 55 hours a week of work. I worked 3 straight Christmases. I remember celebrating Christmas Day in the newsroom, where from 4 p.m. till 12:30 a.m. we did a white elephant gift exchange. We had cupcakes. We did not see our family. The newsroom staff was our family. Like you said, my time there from 2002 to say 2008 or so, we were expected to work there 2 years, maybe 3, and then climb the ladder. It was an understood rule that this was not a long-term type position for us. You guys are trying to change that. What I like from you, Katherine, is to give us firsthand anecdotal perspective of what it's like to be a staff writer, a reporter at the Daily Progress.
So this is my second job out of college. I moved here from a paper of 2 reporters and 2 feature writers. So this was a big step up with 6 reporters. And it has always been on my radar because there's 2 other friends of mine from college that work at the paper too, and I've always admired the work of the Daily Progress. It really does, it's not just a small community newspaper, that we compete with the national outlets that view Charlottesville as their coverage area. So, and I think we respond to the challenge, the scene and the thing and what happens in Charlottesville to give the community the local news it deserves. But it's hard to work there, it's hard to work in small papers everywhere. We all work a holiday throughout the week. I think I worked New Year's Day this year, but then we rotate through. We really like our jobs. I would think it's not, we don't have obscene work requirements of 3 stories a day. I think we might write 5 to 6 stories a week, depending on the news cycle. And it's a wonderful workplace. Our newsroom is our family in a lot of ways because we're just a great group of people. But the reason why we're doing this is because we like our jobs, and we know that they can change in a moment's notice. The paper can be sold, leadership can change, corporate edicts can come down, and we want to lock in something for ourselves so we're not constantly wondering when something's going to change that will negatively affect our workplace, because we like our jobs and we want to stay here as long as we want to. We don't want to feel that we have to leave after 2 years.
Well said. Jump in here. Same question.
Yeah, this is my second job too. I came from a similar paper in Harrisonburg. When I got there were 7 news reporters, 3 features writers, and 3 photographers. And when I left, there were 5 reporters, 1 feature reporter, and 1 photographer. And so it's mostly a lateral move, but it is important to feel. I went through a paper getting bought, and there were layoffs, and people were told when the purchase happened that everybody would have a job, and so there's no way to challenge that. And then a couple weeks later, people started getting laid off, people who've been there for 20 years or more with no notice, and having something that lets you know that that's coming, because we all know that that's a reality of this field, that just having that extra step of protection, because right now there's nothing that we could come in tomorrow and they could just say they had planned to lay everybody off already. Anything can happen, and you want to have a little more protection, a little peace of mind, so you don't have to worry about that on top of the day-to-day worries that you have. And it's a day-to-day thing. I work late nights all the time because there's so many different meetings in the city. And this year will be my 4th straight Thanksgiving that I've worked since I got out of college.
Respect.
And we're so happy that you're going to be working Thanksgiving, Nolan.
At this point, I've just decided it's just a tradition. I'm just going to keep doing it. But it's tough. I mean,
it's hard.
But when you're in college and they tell you, it's hard, and you're going to be working all the time, and you're never going to see your family, and you're going to have all these late hours and not get paid much, you're like, okay, they're exaggerating. But then you get out here and you're like, oh, well, they weren't telling us quite enough. So it's important to have some sort of peace of mind in your job, which everybody wants.
And I would think, to kind of add on what Nolan was saying, the Daily Progress, from where I came from, it's a wonderful newsroom. It's just, I can't say anything more about it on that front. But journalism is hard enough. Doing our job day in and day out, there's stressful and uncertainty with that, and we want our workplace to not be a source of that uncertainty and that stress. So we can just focus every day on telling the stories of the community. We're going to meetings, reporting on what our elected officials are doing. That's the work we want to do. This has been a lot of work to get to this point where we've gone public with our union, but we think it's important so that we can then do the work that that we're dedicating our life to.
You're getting props from Annie Marie. She's saying, go, Katherine, go.
Thanks, Annie. Appreciate
Joe
it.
Robertson is watching right now. She says, I'm so glad to see this happening. Innovative, smart, and successful thought-out campaign to bring justice to our local media outlets. Thank you, Katherine, and thank you for showing women it is okay to stand up for themselves in the workplace. Welcome Charlotte, North Carolina to the program. Welcome the Richmond Times-Dispatch to the program. We have folks watching in Philadelphia. We have folks watching across Central Virginia. We have folks watching in Atlanta right now. Jim Hamlet, thank you for joining us. Abby Guskin, thank you for joining us. Monica Johnson, Karen Lee Thompson, thank you for joining us. Throw this to you. The Daily Progress in Charlottesville, Virginia, especially after August 12th, is this epicenter for news, for various kinds of coverage. I mean, you got the government beat And I find it as a sexy beat. You might find this as this chaotic. I'm not going to speak for you. I think it's sexy as F. Okay? You have the chaos that's happening at council meetings. You have 3 spots that are up for grabs on November 5th in what is arguably the most important election in Charlottesville, Virginia history. 3 spots that could go to, say, a Snook, a Brown, and maybe a Michael Payne. And then you see a Hill, Snook, and Brown voting in a block for the next 2 years. Or maybe Cena McGill gets the nod, and then you see a Payne, McGill, and Walker voting in a block for the next 3 years. I would like for you to put what it's like to cover Charlottesville City Council in perspective. We read your stories. I love reading your byline. I love reading your content. But just give me what it's like to write this content, what you're going through. Give us the juice.
I mean, it's not easy.
It's hard.
Sure. It's hard. It's definitely, there's a positive and negatives to, personally, for an engaged community. I mean, you get a lot of interaction with readers, and sometimes it's negative and sometimes it's positive. You get a lot of interactions with officials, and sometimes it's negative or positive. And some of that stuff, though, is
part of the job.
It's part of the job, but some of it comes from things that happened before we got here, and that we haven't had the ability to right those wrongs because it's above our head and we don't have a seat at the table to say, we needed to apologize for what happened, our role in the community's history, our role in blaming West Bellamy for August 12th. So we need to apologize for these things, but that's above our head. And so those things, when I came into the position, all of that history of the paper, this editorial about Wes, that was already there, and I was just put in there as the person to target that at. I've come to realize it's not anybody who came here. If Katherine was in my position, they would have caught the same thing. Yeah. So it's challenging, but it's definitely lively. There's just so many different. There's such a changeover in city government, and it's basically covering a transition in both the community and the government, and I think it's exciting. When I left college, I wanted to be a sports writer, but I couldn't get hired, so I took a government reporting job, and now I've decided I want to do government reporting because I just like getting into the nitty-gritty detail.
In retrospect, I totally would have bypassed sports and gone your route.
Well, I applied for sports. They said no. I applied for features. They said no. And then news was like, oh, okay, I guess we'll take them.
Grace in D.C. says, Katherine, thank you for empowering women everywhere. I will relay what you are doing to our daughter. You are truly someone that we respect and appreciate. I'm going to throw this to you. Give us the X's and O's of starting a union. I mean, you got to keep this on the DL and the hush-hush. I mean, I want, the firsthand, juicy details of, how this initially started. And no rules here. Don't wait for me to prompt.
So I would say that this stems back to earlier this year when it was kind of...
Q1, January, February?
Yeah.
Okay.
The days are the months have blurred together in the last year, but January or February, there were layoffs across the country. I think we lost hundreds, if not thousands, journalism jobs in a week. And that culminated with the bloodbath at BuzzFeed. So we were in this world seeing journalists that that were new at all phases of their career, just out on the street without a job. And at BuzzFeed, they were able to actually go to their managers and say, hey, and kind of negotiate without a union for severance because the BuzzFeed wasn't going to pay out their unused PTO as a part of their severance. But so we kind of looked at, and then BuzzFeed did eventually unionize. But we looked at that and we said, we do not want to be here a year from now watching our coworkers packing up their desk and wondering what could we have done. That was not going to sit well with us because we would always have been we should have started a union. And the time to start a union is not when people are getting shown the door. That you're too late at that point. So, we're we have to do something. We don't want to just sit here and wait for people that have given decades to this company to leave. And, we want to fight for everyone's jobs. We want to fight for ourselves. And we want to fight for the paper because we're here, we're living it day to day. We believe in the daily progress and the mission of local news.
You guys are straight up fighting, not only for the current staff, but you are fighting for decades of reporters that preceded you at the Daily Progress.
Exactly. And like we hear from everyone, like, oh, it's a bad deal. Like, you're not going to make a lot of money and you're going to leave in 2 years. And we want to say that when, if we leave, that we can tell the people that are in our seats, it's better. It's a better place. We've made the Daily Progress a better place. But the nuts and bolts of this, we just started talking amongst ourselves. We're a very social newsroom.
Sure.
So we just started talking, and slowly over time, we built up enough support to put this thing out and go public. So we're still hoping for voluntary recognition because that's the next step. We're hoping our publisher will voluntarily recognize us. If he doesn't, we'll file for an election with the National Labor Relations Board, and that could be in 4 to 5 weeks, and then we'll take a vote and see what happens.
Yeah, and like Katherine said, that was something that I went through, seeing people get laid off, thinking, what could I have done? Thinking, why them and not me? I haven't been here as long as them. They've got more experience than I am. I was going through someone purchasing your newspaper and seeing that when they come in, they lay people off and not knowing if you have job security and worrying about that for weeks. And then even in last year, I think it was in the summer last year, is when Lee Enterprises took over management, and they had a history of cutting positions, and that was something that, it was before I came here, but that was something that people here were already worried about with what's going to happen with this new company that's running things. That's still, that BH is basically hired to run things and has a history of cutting staff and cutting positions.
Yeah, in fact, the Lee Enterprises outsourced their copy desk at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch fairly recently.
Yeah.
Maybe that was in the summer. Like I've said, the months have blurred together. It's been a long year. And so they've outsourced their copy desk. And so we just know that changes are coming, and we want to have some say in what those changes are and how, and to negotiate for, the benefits, if it's severance or just kind of how that those changes will affect the newsroom, where like right now we have no say.
You guys have folks watching from the News Guild in Washington, D.C. right now. Elliot Robinson, thank you for joining us on the program Charlottesville Tomorrow. Give the show a like and a share on any of the streams you're watching. If you have any commentary you'd like to relay to the panel, put it in the comment box. Send me a DM on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I will pass it along. DM's coming in now. Alexandra Goldstein giving you props. Paige Jones giving you some props right now. Like and share on any of the streams here. This DM comes in via Twitter. What was it like when Warren Buffett said the newspaper was toast? The newspaper industry was toast. I'll put some background on there and throw it to you. Warren Buffett, the billionaire, Berkshire Hathaway, his BH Media Group owns the Daily Progress. Owned the Daily Progress for about 7 years.
2012. So
okay, so about 7 years here, and he goes on the record, despite owning the brand and the platforms, newspapers across the country, and he says newspapers are toast. This is one of the most powerful and influential people in the entire world saying this. The question is, what was going through your minds when this gentleman went on the record saying this?
I mean, it's very unsettling, and it kind of sets the stage for why he might pay someone millions of dollars to manage and bleed as much money as he can out of it than Lee Enterprises. I mean, if he truly thought they were toast, he is a businessman, so if he truly thought that, then he would get out of the game, and because he would be losing money. But
what do you think the point of him saying that was?
I have no idea what goes through his head. I haven't met him. I don't know what goes on in the great mind of Warren Buffett.
I would say he's a businessman. He's looking at the business model is not changing, and the finances are continuing to be bleak. So maybe from his view they are toast, but our argument is, well, what are you doing to improve that outcome? Putting new resources, changing new revenue models. Like, we cannot just continue to rely on advertising and then gouging our subscribers for money. There's not, there has to be another way. And honestly, I don't know what the other ways are, but, if you're the head of a company, that owns newspapers across the country, maybe there's some of well, let's innovate, let's see if there's another option, let's kind of fight for survival here rather than just watch the ship go down.
Yeah, when you're not getting paid six figures to figure that out. Warren Buffett's paying somebody 6 figures to figure that out, but there is that disconnect there. If if he thinks it's a business model that's not working and he's losing a whole bunch of money, but he's this corporate businessman, then why is he going to keep spending money? Why is he just going to keep throwing money in the gutter if he thinks it's not worth it? So in some way, he has to think it's worth it because he still owns VH Media. He's still in the game. So
I would just say, more so what went through our heads is it was disheartening. Like, you know, you're like, okay, well, we'll just continue to go while the person that owns all of our papers thinks that we're toast. So we'll just continue on our jobs.
I mean,
Thank
like,
you, everyone.
it's just
Karen
like,
Lee Thompson
here-
says, why invest and own toast? She literally put that in the feed. I totally agree with that right there.
It's like,
Why
how would
distress
you-
the brands
yeah.
even more?
How would you feel? I mean, how would anybody feel if they just heard that their boss said, this is gonna close eventually because this place this isn't working.
What really concerned me, and I'm going to throw it to you, Katherine, and you're getting props from TJ. Is it Whitehead?
I think so.
Yeah. Well articulated, Katherine Knott. I didn't know unions were so rare for reporting, is what TJ says. Throw this to you. When Lee Enterprises? When the management of the brands was outsourced to a third party and Lee Enterprises, that was when I was like, holy shit. Shit is about to hit the fan here with local newspapers here. Because he pretty much is like outsourcing to a company in Lee Enterprises that has a notorious reputation for essentially stripping a car of all its parts and taking it to a chop shop. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I would say Lee's reputation in the industry is not as bad as some.
Okay.
It's not as great as others, but, you know, and that was, I think, the symbol of like when you're going to pay a company $5 million a year and then a portion of the revenue, of which they've gotten $11.3 million total on top of their $5 million.
They're going to try to cut costs.
Yeah, well,
to maximize their margin.
Absolutely, and that, you know, we all have a standard template on our website, so there are like decisions happening throughout the companies that are now managed by Lee Enterprises. And it's just, I mean, you know, I guess you'd rather someone outsource the management to try to keep the newspapers going rather than sell. So it was different.
It's just unfortunate when it just seems like a lot of people have this idea, like he does, that eventually it's just going to go away, and instead of you can cut costs, and so when you cut those costs, there's no reinvestment of that money to increase revenue. So like reinvesting in resources for reporters or it's things like that. So it's just, let's just get rid of as much red as we can, and then just keep whatever's left over.
I'm going to give historical perspective and then throw it to you. 2002 to 2009 or so for me. When I was there in 2002, we had a cops reporter. We had a UVA reporter. We had a science reporter. Ooh. We had an education reporter. We had a feature columnist in Dave Maurer. We had a sports columnist in Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe. We had a handful of city editors. And then circa 2003, 2004, media generals more focused on their bottom line. They're divesting themselves from television ownership. They're starting to sidestep newspaper ownership. They're focused on stockholders. And next thing we know, people are quitting or they're climbing the newspaper ladder and positions are going unfilled. And then our bosses are asking us, my particular circumstance, Jerry, I would like for you to cover some sports and then cover some council and then cover some UVA. And I'm like, what? What do you do? Do I get a pay bump for this? No, you don't get a pay bump for this, but we will reimburse your mileage. You're already reimbursing my mileage, okay? You will get some new business cards and you may get a new title. So this is how it was like kind of leveraged, or the perception was managed with the folks that were asking to do more with less. I'm going to throw it to you. What is being asked of you guys to do more with less right now?
I would go back to like our kind of our point is that we like our jobs because they're pretty reasonable. Like I wouldn't say that the expectations are unreasonable. We don't have to shoot video. Sometimes we take our own photos since we have a two-man photo department or two-person photo department. We have our social media. There's no story quotas. Like it's all. Like I think it's very reasonable right now. From my perspective, I cover local education or the K-12 system, and
you do a great job with that.
Thank you.
And I really liked your story featuring Shannon Gillikin on the front page. That story
about
was
social and emotional learning.
Yes, EQ.
Yes, that was, and those are the stories that I care about because I'm passionate in covering local education, and that actually came out of a conference that we were able to go to, and the company gave Ruth, our former UVA reporter, time off or the time to go do that. So that was really great. Like I haven't experienced like unreasonable expectations yet, but we don't have story quotas, we don't have to have a metric quota right now, and those are things that I like about my job. Like I'm free to do my job well. I just want to continue that to be the
Yeah,
case.
you want to make sure there's no unreasonable things happening now. You want to make sure that it stays that way.
And I mean, also,
If you don't have a collective voice, then you just have to go along with whatever they say. So the way things are now, if you want them to stay that way, you have to basically get together and say, okay, this is what is working, and we want to keep it that way. I mean, we'll work together to do things better, but we don't want things to get worse so that people leave.
and coming from a 2-reporter, basically a 4-reporter newsroom, covering general assignment, I totally understand it. That's the lay of the game. I'm working on a story that's not related to my beat for the weekend right now, and I totally, those are things that I accept as reality. So I don't think it's out of the realm of unreasonable to ask, pull a general assignment stories. We all help out. We're a team. We do what we can to cover the news of the day.
What are the nuances of launching a union? You said it happened in Q1. You guys are talking together. Mm-hmm. You guys are realizing that we have to do something. How is the charge led?
Basically, just conversations with the people in the building.
Is it like clandestine over cold beers at a watering hole?
I mean, because you don't just you don't
in
want
people's
just,
houses, hanging out with our cats.
Yeah, you just want to you basically just want to start and you see what people's issues are and see if you have some common ground there, and then then you bring it up to having a collective voice and what their thoughts are on getting together with that.
And that's really the big thing. We start with the issues, what's important to people in the newsroom, and we heard across the board: pay, benefits, growth opportunities or lack thereof, long-term security. Those what we hear are when newspapers across the country launch unions as well, and. So it was just those conversations, and then we eventually formed an organizing committee, of which Nolan and I are a part of, and that was the group that kind of did the bulk of the work in writing out the mission statement and getting things done. But we involved as many people that had time to be involved in that as well. We've had potlucks, we've had gatherings, and it's just really solid community building. It's just wonderful when all your coworkers can come together and talk about their work and how we can make it better.
We tried to do this, or we talked about doing this in 2005-06, and we didn't have the courage you guys did. Mm-hmm. Fear started setting in.
And I think the biggest thing too is I always go back to federal law.
Yeah.
For unionizing is protected. This is a federal law. Yes, Virginia's a right to work state, but that comes after.
Yeah.
So when we went public, there was a little bit of trepidation, but at the end of the day, we knew the News Guild had our backs, and so if our company would violate federal law, we knew that there was an option.
So fear? No fear?
Right now?
Yeah.
No fear, because we're protected by federal law. I mean, I think that just comes from misinformation that people have growing up. I mean, I've always been in favor of unions, but I always thought, if the cat gets out of the bag, you're all going to get get a pink slip the next day. But learning more about how it's actually protected and that's a violation of federal law is important. I mean, that's some things that you talk to people and they're like, oh, well, I might be on board, but, I don't want to get fired. But you have to be like, okay, but you can't because that's illegal. So
that literally is what was going through all our minds.
Yeah.
Then.
And I would also say to your fear point, the existential dread that people that are in this industry anyway, that I'm sure has changed in the last 10 years. I don't think we didn't encounter a lot of open fear because I think we're just living in constant fear anyway about the state of our jobs.
Yeah.
Well said.
And then you say, well, you have that fear now, but I mean, it's you could be laid off tomorrow, but if we do this, you could get notice of that. We could try to make sure that happens.
And we know that there's no certainty with what we're doing, forming a union anyway. We don't know what our
what could happen here.
So
what are the options?
So what we want to do is if we go to an election, we want to plan to win, and then we'll negotiate with the company for a contract. And what's in that contract is up in the air because it's going to depend on everyone, and everyone will have a say in what we negotiate for because we're a democracy. A union is a democracy, and at the end of the day, everyone will vote on that union, on that contract. And if it's not ratified by the whole group, it's we go back to the drawing table. So what's actually in it, we don't we have ideas, but we're not going to say anything concrete because we have to talk with everyone, and let everyone have a say in it.
Clara
But-
Ziegler is giving you some props right now. We literally have folks in Omaha watching the show right now. Give it a like and a share on any of the streams that you're watching. Is the News Guild similar to a union? I mean, that's a question that's coming in. It is a union.
It is a union.
It's basically like a larger. It's a union of unions.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
we're part of the News Guild, which is like a part of the Communication Workers of
Yeah.
America
It's the Communication Workers of America's overall
umbrella.
and then underneath that is the News Guild, which focuses on media
Mm.
outlets.
Did you consider this? And you guys educate me here. There was a number of reporters, incredibly talented, at the TD, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, that defected from the newspaper to create essentially a nonprofit journalism model. Help me here. Did you guys consider at all pursuing the Charlottesville Tomorrow model, or did you guys consider at all defecting, creating a team, and creating your own brand,
Well,
if you may?
It's a little different. The Charlottesville Tomorrow model is a little different than the Virginia Mercury model. I mean, it was started
Yes,
by
Virginia
a
Mercury is what it was.
former school board member. It started Charlottesville Tomorrow, and so versus journalists getting together and starting their own. So I mean, that wasn't something we considered because that already existed. So it's like then you're competing with something that's already here, and so we like what we do and where we do it. So we wanted to focus on improving where we are instead of just giving up and jumping ship.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever thought of like, let's just start our own organization because, the Daily Progress as an institution in this town, and that's what we're a part of, and it's about making the institution
we like
better.
working for a daily publication versus long term. Like this is more long term things that you don't know when your stories are going to run. Like there's more you can cover more in a daily publication than you can just as abstract nonprofit.
And I guess too, that's why when I got out of college, I wanted to be at a local newspaper. I wanted to have a beat. I enjoy the idea of covering, having a beat that I'm reporting on day in and day out. And so I've never thought of, that's always just been my dream of working for a local newspaper because it means something when you say you're from the Daily Progress. And there's history there, there's baggage there, yes, of course, but having to churn out a daily stories and just cover every aspect of the community is important. And that's what we're saying that institution is important and we're here to make it stronger.
Nick Yall, welcome to the program. Hannah Cox, I think, is a copy editor.
Yes, she's on our organizing committee.
Watching the program right now. Give it a like, give it a share. Tim Ryan in DC, thank you for watching the show. I'm going to get to these direct messages. I'm going to throw this out and kind of go to bat for you guys. The heat that you guys catch about, say, the editorial that was put into the Daily Progress with Dr. Wes Bellamy and him being the impetus, if you may, of August 12th. This is not a reflection of these two people. This is not a reflection of current staff writers. This is a reflection of legacy of folks that were on the staff in the past that wrote this. Unfortunately, you guys are on the front lines, so you're catching that shit, which I think is unfair to you guys as staffers and what you guys are about. You obviously have something to say about this.
Well, I was just saying, that's the part of the game of working for local news. Is that
Any newspaper has that baggage,
any newspaper,
right?
you look in our archives, and that's what I like. I love going through the archives of the Daily Progress and any old papers that I've worked at. It's fun, and we are the record of the community, good, bad, and ugly.
Right.
And so yes, while we weren't there for it, but I'm once I started working here, I became part of the Daily Progress and all of that entails. So.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, decisions that were made, of what to
Was it
cover.
Anita who wrote the editorial?
No.
It was not.
No.
Was it the publisher?
We're not going to talk about that.
Okay. All right. We don't
It
want to
was-
talk about that? Okay.
It was a decision that was made before we got here, but it was, even with stuff that was covered before we got here, like the election of 2017, the way that was covered, there were some people have issues with the story about Mayor Walker's emails and the stuff that was written then. But those stories are attached to the institution, and then when you become part of the institution's attached to you. So it's not necessarily you that they're personally mad at. They're more angry with how things have happened over the years.
Right. Well said. I thought one of the most dynamic quotes, we're not going to let you in. I thought one of the most dynamic quotes, someone coming to the door. I thought one of the most dynamic quotes from your press release, from y'all's press release, was the quote that you included in the presser and the release, where you said, the folks that are covering affordable housing, and I'm paraphrasing, but the folks that are covering affordable housing can't afford to live in the community and the stories they cover.
Yeah. I mean, the average, according to the Low Income Housing Coalition, you have to make $45,000, and none of us are anywhere near that for a one-bedroom. To comfortably live in a one-bedroom, which means you don't spend, I think it's 30% of your income on rent. And I mean, before I moved in with my girlfriend, I mean, it was basically my rent was an entire paycheck was my rent, and was what it's going up to. And it's just, the way things are moving here, you just can't, right now there's not really an opportunity for advancement, because it's more of a, do they feel like they have money this year to give you guys a raise or not? There's not like with experience comes more, comes like a stepping stone with your pay scale. It's more like, I mean, there's people that's been working there for a long time who haven't gotten a raise in more than 10 years.
I didn't get a raise for 3 straight years.
I mean, there's people who haven't got one for like 10, 13 years.
Right.
Who've been working there, and the housing prices 13 years ago and they are now, and you're still on the same salary. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Dude, I was hustling for like 6 different publications while writing for the newspaper.
Yeah.
I was doing daily talk show, writing for Cavalier Corner, stringing for any of the teams, the visiting teams, publications that were coming to play in Charlottesville, stringing for them, while also covering UVA. So I would have to write the story in the same deadline, but from 2 different perspectives. It was effing brutal.
Yeah. I mean, there's a different opportunities with that for sports than there are for
of course,
because it's not like we can't.
You can't
I mean,
put city government.
I can't write for CVille
and
Weekly
the Philly
at the same
Inquirer.
time. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
I totally.
I mean,
get it.
and sometimes you can put it in the Philly paper, but usually at that point, that's when the national media comes here, and then it's just a banana time. So I mean, you have to focus on what you're doing and who you're doing it for, because there's no one else you can really do it for.
We got some DMs coming in. I'm going to throw the questions to you. This one's from Kai Heller. Jerry, I love the show. I try to watch as much as possible. I respect the people that are trying to do better for themselves and for the paper in totality. We all know the value of a newspaper of record. I'm curious if you can ask your guests how they look at volunteer or independent journalists like, say, Socialist Dog Mom, and whether they are competition or whether they are a resource for what they are doing. That's a good question right there.
I mean, I'd say the more journalists, the better. This is a really vibrant news town. When I tell people about Charlottesville, I say we have two TV stations, an independent or a weekly, and a news nonprofit, and multiple other journalists that are around. It's like, and no one expects it, but that's why Charlottesville is a news-hungry town and definitely deserves a healthy, daily local newspaper. Yeah. And so, everyone, the journalists like Socialist Dog Mom, Molly, are great, and the more the better.
And the interesting thing about this, I'm going to throw it to you. The interesting thing about what happened with Molly is she ended up getting pink slipped by the CVille Weekly for writing commentary about Charlottesville police. And the publishers of the CVille, and the CVille's watching right now, so I'm going to catch some shit. So the publishers of the CVille said, you know what? We are an ad vehicle. We are not a hard news vehicle per se. We don't want your content in our publication. And I follow her in her coverage of city council, and she has some liberties that say you do not, where she's able to put firsthand perspective. She's dropping profanities. It's very colorful. I see it as almost like a sidebar or like as a resource in addition to Nolan's coverage.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I mean, nothing against Molly, but I mean, she goes to a lot more stuff than I can ever get to. I mean, I saw today she's going to try to go to the parking advisory panel, and I'm like, I'm not going to have time to go to that. But it's more, she can tell you things that are happening in real time, and I've kind of realized that, the people who want meetings live tweeted are going to follow her, and they're not going to necessarily care about me. She has the ability to do something, do that. I've tried to do it, and I'm like, I can't write a story at the same time because I can't focus on doing that and what's going on and writing a story. So
her story is the live tweets.
So she also has more. She can say things like a city staff member, and like I have to, who's this person's name? What's their title? Like I have to do more of a she does it in a stream of consciousness
Right,
kind of way
right.
that is different. I mean, there's just so many different things for people in the city, but when I left Rockingham County, the Board of Supervisors, they approved a resolution for me, and the chairman told me that, if something breaking happens, I'll go to the TV station just to see just to get the general idea of what happened. And then on the way into work, I'll listen to the radio station to get a little better idea. But if I really want to know what happens, I'm going to read the newspaper to get the full story. So it's more of a here's the quick hitters, here's an overview, and then here's everything you could want to know.
And to that point, I think a news community or a community has like a news ecosystem, and we all serve different roles.
100%.
And the Daily Progress provides a lot of context and a lot of background. So if you want to kind of catch up on what's been going on in issue for the last 2 years, hopefully you can go through our archives and get a pretty good idea of the ins and outs and the different saga that's been going on. And that's what we try to do. But we're arguing that it's an important role in that ecosystem that kind of helps everyone else thrive, and it's a symbiotic relationship for everyone else.
It's kind of hard to get back 2 years of Molly's tweets. I don't know if your browser could go back that far and not crash.
Yeah, because she's putting out so much content.
She's got so much. Yeah, I mean, it's more of a in the moment kind of thing versus the paper.
Yeah, everyone serves. Everyone has a role and a function.
I also we're not trashing Molly. She was there yesterday supporting it.
She grinds.
Yeah, I mean,
I respect her hustle.
She's part of that ecosystem in our community.
And more content in the ecosystem is better for all of us because it empowers us and it offers perspective, and it's up to us to decipher what the content we're reading, whether it's legit or credible, and whether we should take it for what it's worth or whether it's motivated by some kind of ulterior motive. Bellamy Brown is watching the program. We have a lot of DMs coming in here, and I'm going to throw this to you.
Well, in some ways, I want to say that those other ecosystems with the history that some people have that are an issue with the progress, those other ways that people share what's going on gives us an idea of what people care about, or like what the issues are in the community that we can then go and focus on.
You're basically saying if a Twitter thread goes viral, you guys are following the thread and okay, we need to follow up on this.
Basically, if we see 1,000 people tweeting about this one issue in the city or the county, then we're like, okay, there's people who care about this. Let's investigate more and find out what's going on, instead of if it's just three of the same people.
On Facebook or any other outlets, we look for community feedback.
Versus three of the same people who always say things or complaining about the same things versus a whole bunch of people getting on board. If they haven't contacted you because for some reason they don't feel comfortable, then you get a better idea of what's going on.
I count 13 former Daily Progress alumni watching the show right now. Michael Ivey is watching the show. He was a fabulous designer and fabulous guy in the copy desk when I was there. Mike, I believe you went Richmond Times-Dispatch and now are in advertising now in Richmond. Correct me if I'm wrong in the feed. Becky Calvert watching. Derek Naughton, one of the founders of Three Notch, watching. We got a comment from Ray Cadell. My late brother Ted worked for a long time for our hometown newspaper, the Wilmington, Delaware News Journal. Unionization helped, but the purchase by Gannett, not so much. Some very similar dynamics with what happened with him and with the Daily Progress. Throw this question to you. How do we think... Does it go to BH Media? Is this now in BH Media's court?
I believe so.
As of this moment, it's
because you guys have thrown the ball to them, right?
As of this moment, it's in their court to decide if they're going to voluntarily recognize this or not.
And if they say no?
Then it goes to the National Labor Relations Board to decide when we have an election.
Okay, and then at the National Labor Relations Board, what happens then?
Our lawyers and their lawyers will get together and kind of decide on who makes up the group that can unionize, and then they'll set the election day and time, and we'll go.
We wait till we.
But we would. I would think this is a BH. I mean, from experience at other papers that have unionized with other companies, and in Omaha, when the Omaha World Herald unionized last year, that there are people in the corporation, not here at the Daily Progress, that are also going to be involved.
Annie Schultz is watching, former anchor at NBC 29, now living in Ohio. Mike Ivey corrects me, and I'm sorry about the mistake. No, I went to a nonprofit in Greater Richmond Partnership. I've been here for 12 years today. He's a fabulous, fabulous designer and fabulous person to work alongside. Throw this to you. John Shifflett, who I work with at the newspaper, is a sports editor. Jenny Rector, who I tremendously admire, still city editor?
Yes.
Yeah.
City editor. Ruth, who just found out has broken my streak as the youngest editor of the Daily Progress, who you said is 25?
I believe
She
so.
just turned 25.
Just
yeah.
turned 25.
Like
I was
last
26.
2
Damn
weeks
it,
ago.
Ruth. Throw this to you here. The difficulties, because I don't want to speak for you. When I was there, when we were there, Jenny admired her, loved John, okay, loved Josh Barney. The difficulties of forming a union on the DL when people that you do respect are in a management role.
We've said all along it's professional, not personal. Like
Well
we like our managers. They're great people. They do great things for the paper. But at the end of the day, there are decisions that are made at a corporate level that aren't made here in Charlottesville. And that's what we're trying to protect against.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing against our managers. We enjoy working with them. They're part of what we like about being where we are. I mean, there's things that are mandated to them that we have to deal with. It's not their fault. It's someone above them that they have to give to us or that they have to do.
This is coming from one of your colleagues in newspapers here. Jerry, please don't use our name. I'm curious to ask your panel of what they see the future of newspapers looking like. It's a good question. Is it a print outlet? Is it a straight digital outlet? I mean, what is the future of what's going to happen here?
I mean,
think it's a hybrid. I mean, because people like to say that it's only old people in nursing homes that like to have the physical paper,
I
but
get
like
3.
you said, like, you're obviously not an old person in nursing homes.
But I'm
I
a
mean,
news
there's still,
junkie.
I mean, I still like.
You get print?
I like having the physical paper. I mean,
I don't.
You
every
do
day-
not?
no.
So I mean, there's people who are still going to like that. I mean, it might become a smaller segment of it, but I think it's obviously going to become a smaller segment because the cost of physically printing it versus the cost of doing the work. But I mean, there's going to be more focus on getting things out there digitally.
I'm
And
curious
I'd
of
add
why
to-
a fabulous reporter like yourself does not like to hold the print
Well,
product.
I should say I read it predominantly on my phone, but I have a very large box of newspapers in my apartment
Yeah,
of all my clippings. So
Same.
it's both, but it's just the way that I've attuned my news gathering skills. But that's really in the weeds. To your point about the future news, we don't know what it holds, but it's going to require journalists who
Yeah.
are protected and supported in the workplace.
Yeah.
And whatever that institution is, like that's the core. Is you need good journalists,
Yeah, there's
regardless
not-
of the medium or the
There's
format.
not going to be a six-figure executive writing about Charlottesville City Council meetings. I don't think Warren Buffett's going to come here and be the one who covers Charlottesville City Council. So there's going to be people like us on the ground, in the community, in the weeds, doing the work.
I sent you a screenshot via your email, Judah. Get that on screen here. And what I sent him was essentially this, guys, the newspaper's coverage of your unionization efforts. So it's this right here.
Yep.
Up, you can see I get the newspaper.
Yeah.
Okay, this right here. He's going to put this on screen. Please correct me. Is this a sidebar?
It's a brief.
It's a brief.
Yeah.
Okay, a brief on the left side of, is this A2?
A3.
Okay, this is A3. So, not on the front page, not on above the fold. I couldn't find mention of it online. Maybe I just didn't find it. It was certainly buried. Put this on screen when you get this, please, Judah. What did you think of this, which people are about to see, being the coverage of your efforts?
We were happy to see something.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
That was
I
more than I
happy because
expected.
that was more than I expected. I think that was something I asked a couple of weeks ago with the News Guild. People like, do they actually get a story in their own publication? They said it's kind of rare that they do. So it shows to me that management still thinks that this is an important thing for the community, or otherwise they wouldn't have put it in there.
You know what I think it is? And this is me saying it, not you guys saying it. What I think it is I think the guys that are management at the actual newspaper, who you guys have respect for, have so much respect for you that they got something in there into the newspaper without even going up to the corporate ladder. And they're like, we respect these people so much. They deserve some coverage. We cannot risk this being A1 above the fold because of fear of backlash of how it can impact us. It's going on screen. Thank you, Judah. Because of fear of backlash of what it can do to us. But we have so much respect for the staff because it's the heartbeat and the pulse of the product that they deserve some kind of attention.
That's a good way to think about it.
I mean, I hope that's the case, but I don't know for sure.
I think that's what the case is. And I think, and I'm going to throw this out here. I'm Elizabeth Cromwell, CEO, Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the program. You have City Hall, UVA, watching the show, right? City Hall at Charlottesville watching now, and the communications office at the University of Virginia watching right now. The clip is on screen. I'm going to throw this to you here. I am so intrigued as a news junkie of how this is going to play out in the local cycle. Because I used to work for NBC 29, as I told you off air, and NBC 29 is paying its TV folks, its reporters, meager salaries. And the time constraints are even more, if not more challenging than what you guys are doing. In that I was showing up to work when I was working for NBC 29 at freaking 4 a.m. Okay? And that's because the news started going on at 6, Sunrise News. It was effing brutal. Okay, so where I'm going with this is I'm curious to see how the CVille Weekly, NBC 29, CBS 19 cover this, because their corporate ownership may not want to allocate a 30 or 60-second block or ink to this story because it may empower or rally the staffers, the reporters, the on-air personalities to do a similar type of endeavor or effort as you guys, and to unionize at NBC 29 or CBS 19 or the CVille Weekly. Because straight up, we know across the board that this is a challenge that everyone in media is facing. Have you thought, I'm sure you guys have thought about this as extremely intelligent and forward-thinking people.
I mean, we love our news partners at NBC 29 and everyone at CBS 19 and CVille Weekly and everywhere. So how they cover it, we think it's an important story for the community to know about, and we were the top story on NBC 29 last night for
Your
sure.
boy Henry Graff was in the parking lot. It wasn't the Daily Progress parking lot, right?
He was on the sidewalk.
Yeah, it was the library parking lot.
Okay, because you guys could not be in the Progress parking lot, right?
No.
Yeah, no, it's private property.
For our cupcake rally. It was more of a tailgate.
I mean, CBS 19 when the NBC 29 were there yesterday. I talked to, I always get it wrong. It's either Susan or Sandy at the local NPR station yesterday too.
Did a good job with that.
Supposed to be talking to CVille Weekly sometime this week. So, I mean,
are you talking to Lisa Province?
I was told somebody would reach out to me. I'm still there today, so I haven't checked my phone since I got here. So
I've got to bet it's Lisa. Mike is throwing this to you. This is a Daily Progress alumni. Starting salaries were anemic during my years. I took a pay cut the first year coming from the newspaper in Petersburg, where I had automatic overtime in order to move up the pecking order to Media General. I was embarrassed offering copy editors fresh out of college $24,000 a year to work for the Daily Progress. $24,000 a year, Mike. When I started at that job, I was making $10 an hour, which translated into just under $21,000 a year when I was doing it. And literally, I grew up, I'm going to throw this to you, probably similar to you. I grew up in a household that put so much priority on reading and news and what was going on in the news cycle. I remember fighting with my brother over the funny pages or the sports section over breakfast growing up. And I love looking at the Agate box scores, page 2, all the stats, and following the Atlanta Braves or the Redskins. I'm just junkie for news, okay? And I loved having the print. I loved having the ink on my fingers. Where I'm going with this is my cheesy American dream, and it's not cheesy, but my American dream coming out of UVA was I'm going to be the next great journalist.
Yeah.
And it was just a passion. Okay? Is that something that is you embody?
I mean, I certainly want to. What I told my family at Christmas last year is I'm going to do this job as long as it's financially viable. I would hope that that's not the case anymore.
Do they support you?
They were they kind of chuckled because they don't understand, or they didn't get the full breadth of it. But that shouldn't be the case. Quality, people that that want to dedicate their careers to this industry should have that opportunity. And if you want to do that in Charlottesville, that should be an opportunity without having to live along or near the poverty line. If you want to own a house and have a family in Charlottesville, you should have that opportunity. I would say, though, on the question of salaries, the Daily Progress has made strides in the last 4 years on that front.
You play this game well. You really do.
I try.
I can tell.
We got raises recently, which helped.
First time?
That was the first time I've ever gotten a raise in my 3 years of journalism.
Yeah, that was...
Which is not very long.
I think I got one there was just a cost of living adjustment I got at my last job was all I ever got. This one was told as a merit-based raise. But there were some people who hadn't got one in a while who got one. I mean, like I grew up, I wasn't old enough to know what was going on in all the government, but my grandma would take the sports section and the comic section, and I would read those when I was at her house. To this day, she still, I might be months before I get home, she'll hold on to the Raleigh News and Observer for a particular NC State game or story that
Love
she
that
wants
paper.
to give to me to read. She's like, "Oh, did you see this?" I guess you have a stack of.
My
little stack
grandma
of
still
paper.
mails me clips from the Daily Press in Williamsburg, where I grew up in Williamsburg. She
Yeah.
lives in Hampton. I still get clips from her maybe once or twice in the month in the mail.
Wow.
And it's a joy.
Yeah, I mean, she'll have that ready for me when I get home. I'll go home after Thanksgiving, but that weekend, and I'm sure she'll have something for me. I mean, it's just, I've always liked to have, that's probably where I started liking to have it and see it, because that was in a time before the internet was really big, so it was more focused on the hard copy.
Throw this to you here. This is another DM coming in. Hold on one second. Guys, how do you see social media impacting news moving forward? Good question. You want to throw that one to you, Katherine?
It's all a part of our life now. We live tweet our meetings, we tweet out the story links, but nothing replaces journalism. Social media is not a replacement. It's a way to access it, of course, but journalism is reporting, asking questions, getting answers, giving context, going places, like all the gambit of that. And so
You have the News Guild Communications Workers of America watching the program right now. Do you feel like you guys, we're an hour in, you guys have crushed it. Do you guys feel like you're leaders? I mean, do you look at like trendsetters? I mean, you got newspapers probably across, I don't want to get dramatic or hyperbole here, but you probably have newspapers across the Mid-Atlantic, which is safe to say, following your efforts, whether you're going to be successful and whether or not they can duplicate these efforts.
I mean, we're not the first to do it, too. So I would
That's
say we're
three in the Commonwealth, right?
we're following the footsteps of papers across the country that have taken this step. And the recent wave of unionizations you're seeing really started with the LA Times about 2 years ago. And that kicked off a lot of this. And there are papers large and small. There's a smaller paper, kind of our size, in Casper, Wyoming, that unionized. And there's big metro papers. So I wouldn't say we're
Daily
we're
Press
leading.
did, right?
They're a part of the Virginia Pilot.
Yeah,
down
Virginia
in
Pilot, okay.
The Tidewater Media Guild. So I would say we're leaders, but we're certainly following the current. We're like following the footsteps of everyone else that's been doing this and a part of the rising tide.
You
or
got
wave.
this question. The Virginia Pilot recently outsourced their award-winning design team. Is the Daily Progress newsroom nervous about the same thing
Oh,
happening?
yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody, especially people who are owned by somebody who owns multiple publications in an area, are worried about that. I mean, that's what happened in my last job. They didn't necessarily outsource it, but they centralized it all in one place. So I mean, you've got to be worried that all of these papers are going to be laying them out in one place, and they're going to cut everybody except the people that they think can do it.
Yeah, like I said, the existential dread is real. We're afraid
Yeah.
for our jobs. We're afraid for our desks, or like the copy desks and everything. So
I got two more questions coming for you, and then we'll wrap up. We're not going to get to all your questions, guys. I apologize. Their most precious commodity is their time. They've given us an hour. We're going to respect their time. Two
you
questions
can also
left.
email us your questions, and we will answer.
Okay, and follow them on. They're active on Twitter,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? Is that probably the best place?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a good place, yeah.
Okay. This is from TJ. Just a question for Nolan and Katherine. Are there any local newspapers you know of that have created a financially viable model in the digital age without compromising quality? I think that's a good question.
I mean, we're the only local newspaper, so I don't think our quality has been compromised in the last few years. I mean, at least since I've been there. I can't speak for the time before I was there.
It's hard. I mean, I can't point to a specific example right now because everyone's figuring it out. This is like an ever-evolving
It's like the
situation.
Wild West.
It really is. And, what we're kind of tying it back to the union, what we're saying is that we want a say in that future. We want the Daily Progress to continue to be around. We just don't want to watch
Somebody's going to figure it out one day, and everyone's going to do their own little version of it. So
But it
we
will.
could be the ones to figure it
at
out.
the end
It
of the
could
day,
be,
it requires,
it requires
supported and protected journalists and a community that supports the local
Yeah.
newspaper.
The one way to not do it is to gut the newsroom or
Right.
put more burden on them.
The one way not to do it is to take Associated Press copy and put it into a local newspaper, as opposed to empowering and allocate resources to people like this who cover the news in our community, hold leaders and influencers and politicians and, as you said, small businesses accountable for their actions. Because the last thing we want, and we'll give each of you guys a final word and close the show, the last thing we want, the last thing I want, the last thing we all want is to have a daily progress that is bullshit AP copy. Because the last thing I need is bullshit AP copy in my daily progress or in my daily newspaper, because I can find that AP copy anywhere online. I am a junkie for news, and I want to read what's happening at City Council, at education. I want to read what's happening at the University of Virginia. The story that, was it Allison's byline in today's paper about the Historical Society?
That's
and
Allison.
Coy Barefoot's resignation,
Yeah.
and the nitty-gritty about folks on the
the
board
advisory council.
that had
Yeah.
no freaking idea that
Yeah.
they were a part of this. I mean, that was
Yeah.
news.
Yeah.
That was fabulous news. I crave that stuff. Final word, ladies first, anywhere you want to go.
I would just say that this is the only thing that I've seen in my short tenure of journalism that has given me hope for the future. Watching newsrooms across the country come together and fight for their publications is a beautiful thing to see, and we're so thrilled to be doing it and to be a part of this, and we're hoping for voluntary recognition.
Same thing. It's very humbling to have a whole group of people who get on board with the same thing and have a lot of support from the people throughout the community of what we're trying to do, and say that they believe in local journalism, and that's what's most important.
Follow this story closely, guys. This story has a direct impact into the Charlottesville community. If we have resources allocated to the people that hold our most important and influential and thought leaders accountable, then the community is a better place for all of us. When the watchdog starts disappearing, then you start seeing people saying, you know what, I'm going to ask for forgiveness later instead of asking for permission in advance. And that's not what we want as a community. We want people to do what's right for the community in totality and not for themselves in a micro standpoint. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when people start doing things that are right for themselves from a micro standpoint, that right there is when the community becomes a bad place for all of us. I try to close the program with the same message every day. And before I get to that message, we're going to take today's program, we'll archive it in totality on ilovecville.com. We will strip the audio from today's show, and we'll turn it into a podcast on iTunes. We will syndicate today's show for 30 days across the I Love CVille network, which is 17 Facebook pages, 17 Twitter accounts, the third largest Instagram in the community, and a daily e-newsletter that goes out every day at 11 a.m. to over 108,000 inboxes. 11 years of working our ass off on that daily e-newsletter to grow that up. Our open rate is like 47%, and that is very high for an e-newsletter. Usually the industry rate is about 18, 19% for an open rate. I close the show by asking everybody to embody the golden rule. We don't make this about religion. We make this about treating other people in our community how you want to be treated yourself. The golden rule. Charlottesville needs this more than ever. The Commonwealth and the country need this more than ever. It's the I Love CVille Show. Enjoy your afternoon. Crushed it.
Thank you.
Seriously, great work. Great work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the water.
Thoroughly enjoyed today's show.
Well, thanks for having us on.
It was an absolute pleasure. My pleasure. One more thing we got to do is we got to take the photo.